This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
How's it going, everybody? This is Film Session with Haney
and Dewitz,
and we are delighted to be coming at you for another week of sports and Hollywood talk. That's what the show is. If you've never joined us before, we like sports and
we love our film, so come on, stay a while, listen, join.
We'll talk about sports, we'll talk about entertainment, and we're going to have a great time doing it. So, as Dewitz said, stick around. Because you're in for a bumpy ride.
Yes. Excellent. Smithers. Even though that wasn't... Oh, no, Simpsons movie was. Simpsons movie, by far, very underrated animated movie, but that's going way off topic.
I'm a huge Simpsons fan, but I've only seen the movie once.
It's surprisingly very, very good, and you have to wonder that Family Guy at some point in time is going to be making a movie as well.
I don't know if they will.
I'm pretty sure they would. With the right story that they would technically write down, I'm sure if they're almost trying to marvel what the Simpsons have done and the success they have, I'm sure they're trying to mirror image that, because South Park has already made two animated movies, and then Team America: World Police. You have to figure Family Guy has to transcend that route of being an animated movie.
I think South Park only did one.
Well, that was the bigger, longer,
and
uncut.
And then Team America: World Police, which wasn't South Park, it was just Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Right.
So
which was still very good.
I thought it was hilarious.
Yes.
Anyways, boy, we didn't even get started with the show yet. We already went off on a tangent about.
Hey, it's all right.
It's all right.
We're bringing variety.
Right. It's what the show is. You never know where it's gonna go. We have a structure that we like to follow, and then we completely get off path.
You know what? Sometimes we like to follow order. Sometimes we don't. We're just average Joes liking to talk about every little thing that has to deal with sports and with film. We enjoy the stuff that we love, and we hope you guys and girls will also enjoy our show as well. Even if you're not a sports person, sit, listen to us. Maybe you'll have an opinion or so, and you can always feel free to drop it on one of our social media pages.
And before we get started, we of course have to mention Public House Media, the site and platform for our show. They are the people that are allowing us to talk about our passion and share it with you. So check out Public House Media and all the other shows that they have to offer on there, including Coffee with Keith and Katie, the live Facebook show that I'm a part of with my favorite co-host.
Wow.
My wife.
Oh, well that's only fair. I can't accept your wife there as your favorite co-host there, but I could certainly try.
Dewitz, you're my third favorite co-host.
Well, who's the second?
I only have two.
Oh. So you're literally just cutting the middleman out of that one and just throwing me in there.
All right. Now that we're about 5 minutes into the show and we haven't really even started the show yet.
Hot dog.
Let's get started.
Shall we?
I was watching HBO recently, and I saw on there that they came out with a new documentary about Steven Spielberg, and it's a long one. It's about 2.5 hours. I have not finished it, but I have started it. And so far, it's very interesting, I think, and very informative. And they go into... They obviously start with Spielberg as a child and, how he grows up. And they spoke of how he was really this child director prodigy from a very early age. And he was directing these really, I would not like high budget movies.
They were TV movies when he first started out in his mid to early 20s.
Yeah, the first TV movie that he directed at 21 years old.
Yeah.
And Speaking of prodigies, Steven Spielberg and those in Hollywood, it got me thinking about who would be a prodigy in the sports world when it comes to coaching the game. I think, the obvious ones for players are, Kobe Bryant, anybody that just came out of high school straight into the NBA or Major League Baseball. Of course, Kobe Bryant, Wayne Gretzky in hockey, Derek Jeter in baseball.
Right.
But that's easy. We could go on with that for days about young athletes that were great. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go in the direction of coaching, and I thought that Sean McVay of the Rams is a good comparison of what Steven Spielberg was, being a child prodigy director.
That's a fair comparison. Although you have to see with Sean McVay what he's able to do in the second year. Is he able to maintain the wonderful success that you could sort of compare him to Steven Spielberg? Now, Steven Spielberg, when he was 29, he directed the movie Jaws. And he said, even in the documentary and even all the, when you look online about Steven Spielberg's life, that was one of the worst film sets he's ever been a part of because they were overworked so long. The shark, which, spoiler alert, was not a real shark, it kept dying in the water over and over again. They had to build part of the shark. So even on the outs, when you look at the final product and you see the success of how great the movie was, internally, it was just an absolute nightmare. And when Sean McVay came in, right now with what he's at, he has a success like what Steven Spielberg has with the finished product with Jaws. Is he able to take that on to the next step and continue that success going forward and hopefully bringing a Super Bowl title to the Los Angeles Rams?
The thing that I really think will help Sean McVay throughout his entire coaching career, now keep this in mind, he's only 31. He was hired when he was 30. Youngest head coach hire in NFL history. And the Rams were awful last year. Right now, he has them at the top of their division. Nobody expected him to do well because the Rams were terrible last year with Fisher.
Right.
And now, all of a sudden, they're at the top of their division. They're doing very well. They're probably going to make the playoffs, if not have home field advantage throughout the playoffs if they keep winning.
That's a big note right there on your part. Home field advantage.
Hey, they're on top of their division, and all they have to do is keep winning. And they'll most likely have home field advantage throughout. Can you imagine that?
Inside the Coliseum?
Yes, first-year head coach, home field advantage in a second-year NFL market. Not overall, of course, as the Rams had been in L.A. before, but really, L.A. at this point is an expansion market for the NFL again.
Right.
That would be just the greatest story ever. First-year head coach with a struggling franchise that had just moved. It's made for a movie.
It is. Especially in the land with all the famous stars and everything, inside the Coliseum, where you have, hopefully, knock on wood, if and when they make the playoffs and everything, if you can actually get a sellout crowd inside the Coliseum for LA Rams instead of having USC football in there, that would be one heck of a stadium, especially if you're the road team, to try and sneak a victory out of, especially when you have all the fans that are just exceedingly going absolutely bizarre and just trying to just drown out the other team's offensive play calling.
I've been to the Coliseum. It looks great. The one thing that the Rams obviously have an issue with, which is why they're getting their own stadium, of course, that they're going to share with the Chargers, is that it's an old stadium. And it's really just meant for college football now. And it doesn't have the amenities and all the fancy things that you need for the NFL. That being said, it's still over 90,000 people. And if you can fill every one of those seats up for a Rams playoff game, probably not. You're probably only going to fill it up to about 80 to 85 with a number of empty seats because it's still the NFL in LA. And a lot of people just still are not all that interested in it at this time. But McVay is doing a great job for the Rams, getting them in that direction of notoriety in the market. But going back to McVay and his success and comparing it to Steven Spielberg, once Spielberg made Jaws and it was the movie that it was, it basically gave him a hall pass for what? Probably 10 years to screw up.
And Spielberg basically snuck into the studio and just said, I have the script, what can you do? And they said, all right, go do it. And I mean, they were basically over I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, not overdrawn, but they were certainly past the number of days they were supposed to allow to shoot. And like I said, it doesn't matter like what happens like internally, because a lot of people wanted to, just come after Steven Spielberg. Everybody just sees that final product that's either out in theater. Everybody always sees in the movie theater, what's the final product and everything. And that's what you're kind of seeing with Sean McVay. Not so much with the Rams, like with the internal struggle, because obviously we don't know that, but you're seeing this product that's being placed out there that's having an equivalent to the greatest show on turf when Mike Martz was head coach with Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, and all those, with the Hall of Famers over there and everything. You're starting to see a glimpse of that, and, people are starting to buy in a lot. So there's a mad genius that comes with Sean McVay, who's like Steven Spielberg. He's willing to take risk and is willing to try something new. Even if certain things don't go his way, he's willing to try and actually push the envelope a little bit.
Absolutely agree. And I think what his early success is getting on, what Jaws gave for Spielberg, is the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. Where if Spielberg did a bad movie, now he obviously was very successful from the beginning with Jaws, but I think even if it gave him a hall pass, or even if he had one bad movie or two bad movies after that, he would have been given the benefit of the doubt. Well, all right, well, maybe, this actor or actress did not do the best job, or maybe the script was flawed from the beginning and he could only do so much. Now, obviously, that did not happen a lot in his career, as he's arguably the most successful director of all time.
Right.
But I think that does the same thing for Sean McVay with what he's done with the Rams so quickly after a poor season last year. Head coaches in the NFL are given about 3 years to show something.
Yeah.
That's about the standard, it seems. It seems to be about 3 years. Either show us something, show us some sort of light at the end of the tunnel where if we keep you beyond 3 years, we'll be able to get to a higher level.
Right.
But I think what Sean McVay is doing in his first year is automatically buying him 2 more years.
You know what's actually crazy is I was thinking about not just with Sean McVay, but like who you could sort of compare other coaches to other like big name directors. And for whatever reason in my head is you have Bill Snyder, who's the Kansas State football coach, who's just been there for a long time.
Yep.
He sort of reminds me of the way Clint Eastwood is. And it's not just so much like because they're both older gentlemen. It's just Bill Snyder almost reminds me of Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, where he's just saying, get off my lawn. He has that grit and everything about him. Yeah. Like for some reason, I could just picture him just growling on the sideline and just saying like, get off the field or something like that.
Let's go a little broader, D-Wits.
Broad.
And...
Sorry, I want to be my own like voiceover person for it with
broad. And let's go major scope. All 4 major sports in America: football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. I know some people would argue soccer over hockey, but they still play hockey at the highest level in America. They do not play soccer at the highest level in America.
Yeah, thanks for the World Cup there.
Right. So football, basketball, hockey, baseball got me thinking, what movie genres would those sports fall into? And picking some movie genres out of the hat, the ones that seem to be the most popular nowadays, obviously drama and comedy. Those are the 2 pillars. Action is a big one. Mm-hmm. And
maybe fantasy. I don't. That's the first one that popped up into my head.
Let's go with that one. Let's go with fantasy. Yeah, we got to do drama and comedy. Action is a big one, of course, and I like that one too, fantasy. So football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and drama, comedy, action, and fantasy. How would you pair those up? What would be football for you?
You know what's funny is I think 3 out of the 4 sports can actually encapsulate like all of them. And with football could definitely be that one sport that can encapsulate all 4 of them. But I sort of picture football, it can go either one of 2 ways. It can either go fantasy or it can go drama between the 2. If I had to choose one, I would probably go with fantasy a little bit. Just because
fantasy for football.
With fantasy, it just rolls off the tongue there. There's so many people all over the country that at least are at least in one league where they are not. I feel like people are just more devoted to fantasy than just the actual football game, because people only care about the players that they have on their team. And it's just basically when you are on your your iPhone, whatever smartphone you have, or you're on your laptop and everything, and you're drafting like whichever player you want, you are building a fantasy, and you're just picturing yourself as this like GM and head coach in this fantasy realm of your team potentially winning, first place, winning a trophy, or if you're in a money league, doing that sort of stuff. So that's where the fantasy can sort of be drawn into football.
And definitely fantasy football has overtaken now there's a fantasy league for everything. There's fantasy basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer.
But there's more devotion with fantasy football.
It's such a bigger deal for fantasy football now. It's easier to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. You have one game a week. You don't have to adjust your roster rapidly like you do in other sports.
Right.
So definitely I would say fantasy football has overtaken every other fantasy activity there is for sports. However, keeping on the fantasy topic, I would say baseball would be the fantasy film genre.
In what way?
Well, first of all, now just going off the obvious as you did for fantasy football, fantasy started with baseball. I think they called it rotisserie league baseball. There was an ESPN 30 for 30 on it at one point. But the whole fantasy sport thing started with baseball. But I say baseball is more fantasy than anything else, because much like the fantasy movie genre, whether it be, a whole film series or a movie trilogy, you have those crazy devoted fans that claim whatever movie it is, whatever film series it is, it's the greatest thing of all time and it's better than the rest. And you still have those old school baseball fans that, to me, are living in a fantasy world that don't want instant replay as a part of baseball and don't bring all these...
I'd say it's a gentleman's game, but that's more golf.
Right. But, they're just don't bring all this stuff into baseball. It's great the way it is. And, Wrigley Field with no replays and everything like that. For me, it just seems like baseball fans, diehard baseball fans, are in this fantasy world that don't believe that any modern technology should be introduced to the game by any means, and they still think it's America's favorite pastime. It hasn't been America's favorite pastime for the last 20 years. That's been football. Not to rip on baseball by any means.
I was going to say, I don't know about 20 years. Like it hasn't been. I feel like it's still America's pastime regardless, but if you're trying to compare that sport to any other sports about who has the most viewership with everything, then, obviously baseball is losing that, because it is a long game that you're watching. You have football, who's like the biggest revenue generator, like of all the sports. Basketball can most certainly rival football. Lately, with basketball, you definitely can, because of all the storylines.
And basketball is definitely, it's a more worldwide sport, where American football is still very concentrated to America. They're trying to fix that by, bringing all those games over to London.
Right.
But we'll see that. But for me, that's my reason baseball is fantasy. I think people, the fans that like baseball, that are really diehard baseball fans, because I enjoy baseball too, but I think that I'm living a little bit more of the real world to some of those diehard baseball fans that don't believe that any modern technology should be introduced to the game, to replay, to calling balls and strikes. And I'm not necessarily, an advocate for the balls and strikes thing, because a lot of that can go into how great of a catcher can be. A great catcher can make a ball look like a strike depending on how little he can adjust himself. So a catcher plays a big role into that as well. But I think baseball falls into the fantasy category for me.
See, I see baseball falls into drama a little bit, just because, obviously with the way that the last two World Series has gone, with all the drama that led up to it, especially last year when you had the Cubs and the Indians, the two franchises that have had the longest drought of winning a championship. And there's just so much drama that played into it. even this year, you had the Astros, who, was looking for their very first World Series title. You had then the LA Dodgers, who obviously, when you go to LA, it's almost like talking about the LA Rams again. You have all the celebrities there. There's so much drama with Clayton Kershaw. Is he finally going to win the big one? There's more storylines that play out into the postseason with regards to any sport. But like I said, I think I would have given it more so with drama to basketball. But what you've seen with the last 2 World Series and the last 2 playoffs that have come through, I just feel like drama, the storylines, a little bit of the tension built in there. Who's going to come out triumphant and everything. I think baseball sort of edges basketball a little bit with drama.
Sticking with the drama category, I would say that, and you mentioned it, every postseason in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey is always filled with drama. It's the postseason. The postseason, regardless of sport, is all about drama. However, I would give football the drama category because there are fans of the sport and of the teams in the sport that live and die on every snap. And every week is important. There's a huge difference between 14-2 and 15-1 when it comes down to the end of the season. That can be the difference between home field advantage and, having to go on the road. And you can pinpoint a loss to a specific week. The game of football seems so much more dramatic because there are less games. That means so much more. And there seems to be more drama throughout the entire season, where in baseball, basketball, and hockey you have 82 games. Baseball, you have 162. If you start out 0-5 in baseball,
well, you still got like 157 more games to go.
Exactly. You have the whole rest of the season to go.
Yeah.
Much like basketball and hockey as well, where it's very easy to forget about the first month or two of all of those seasons. But for football, if you start out 0-1,
right,
you're automatically fighting uphill against the other team in your division that started 1-0.
Right.
So I would put football in the drama category.
See, I almost gave drama to basketball, but I think basketball has become more of a comedy. And it's more so because, like, number one, there's no defense, which makes it a joke. Nobody wants to play defense. And basketball players are starting to look like soccer players, where you won't get within like a foot and a half of like making contact with them, and then they'll go flying away. It just looks like a bad comedy, like any Pauly Shore movie. It just looks like a very bad comedy out there with basketball. It's just I'm not entertained by it because, and I'm just not a big basketball fan. But just with stuff that you see on the court, when you see like the LeVar Ball family and everything else like that, even that's a whole comedy routine in itself.
They have their own show.
They have their own show and their own joking of a brand they have out there, and we won't go into too much detail, but yeah, I mean, just ultimately, like, from whatever you see it on the court, or whatever I see it on the court, to even off the court in that matter, it looks like a big joke.
Speaking of the Ball family for a second, D, it's going a little bit off track as we always do. I am more convinced that they know what they're doing than I ever have before, because this whole situation with UCLA being a perfect example.
Yeah.
If Lonzo Ball's brother,
LiAngelo,
and LeVar Ball's son, LiAngelo, if he is not on the UCLA basketball team, this whole thing about shoplifting in China is not nearly as big of a news story. Now, it would still be a significant story because you would have college athletes going over to another country and getting arrested.
Right.
But nobody would care nearly as much if it wasn't Lonzo's brother that was a part of that. The big baller brand right now seems like a joke, but if Lonzo Ball ends up being this outstanding basketball player, this is not going to be a joke anymore.
Well, not with the way he's going right now. Not with the way he's going. That's a joke.
He's the youngest player.
You know who else is a joke?
He's the youngest player to get a triple-double in NBA history.
You know who else is a joke? Doubles. That's a joke. Fire everyone.
We could probably compare the Bulls to all right.
Pauly Shore movie. For some reason, Pauly Shore's in my head right now.
Pauly Shore's in your head. It's the second Pauly Shore reference that you've made in the last 5 minutes.
God, why?
He was never that big, even when he was big.
And like, you know what's funny? I forgot what movie I saw. It was when my girlfriend and I we just started dating, and we were watching some Netflix movie, and there was a Pauly Shore movie, and like, you know, you only hear the jokes about Pauly Shore, about him, but then when you actually see a movie with Pauly Shore in it, and I mean, this movie I think came out in the early 90s. I just remember like sitting there watching it, and I'm just like, what the hell did I just watch for an hour and a half? Like you just come out feeling dumber and dumber.
Do you know what my first exposure was to Pauly Shore, D-Wits?
Who was it?
I know what it was. It was a Goofy movie because Pauly Shore did the voice of Bobby Z on a Goofy movie, and all those other Goofy things. Pauly Shore was the voice of Bobby Z, guy talking about the Leaning Tower of Cheesa and everything like that. No way. It was a Goofy movie. What was the name of that band? Powerline?
Yeah. Powerline. Yeah.
Going to that Powerline concert.
It was awesome. And you know what's funny? I always thought for the longest time that was Michael Jackson that was singing that song.
I think it was their version of Michael Jackson, probably. But, yeah, comedy. We completely got off on a tangent there for a second, but basketball comedy for me as well. I think we're right on track with that and all the references that you made.
And I think we can both agree that I think hockey definitely has is action.
Hockey is definitely action. Just nonstop speed.
But it's one of those where you can't watch it on TV. You have to experience it more when you're inside the arena. There's a whole difference as from watching on TV to when you're actually in the arena. You feel the excitement because it's such a small rink and everything, and there's not a lot of space for players to maneuver around, and there's such little nets that just you're constantly you're either on your feet, you're on the edge of your seat, you're cheering for your team. If anyone's ever in Chicago and you get a chance to go to the Madhouse on Madison for a Blackhawks game, check it out.
It's one of those sports where literally you can say blink and you'll miss something.
Yes.
Because any shot on goal can go in. A puck goes off of a defender's skate. It bobbles goes
off the pipe.
Right, goes off the pipe, and that's one of the most breathtaking moments in sports because you see one of those snipers line up from the blue line and fire one of those shots at goal, and you hear that ting off of the bar. As one of the most
makes your heart drop a little bit.
Exactly, you hear everybody go oh ting. And I would absolutely agree. Nonstop action. Everything is moving at 100 miles per hour, and everybody's getting hit. And it's and we would definitely agree. Hockey is action. So we disagreed. We flip-flopped football and baseball. I said football was drama. You said
it's a fantasy.
You said football was a fantasy. I think I came in a little harsh, a little hot on baseball, saying that was a fantasy. Both agreed. Basketball, comedy, hockey, action. Well, that's all we have this week for Film Session with Haney.
And D-Wits.
Can't forget to thank Public House Media once again for housing this show.
Giving us a platform.
Giving us a voice. It's a place where everybody has a voice and where you can share it as well. So, hey, if you have an idea for a podcast, for a live Facebook show, hit them up on their website or Facebook page, and they will get in touch with you, and you can have a voice and share your passion with the rest of us as well, because we all got one. Once again, this has been Haney.
And D-Woods.
And this has been Film Session. Have a good week, and we will see you again.
Adios, amigos.